What is up, guys? Welcome back to Think Shank. We are jumping in with the next team coming out of free agency that I really think is worth exploring, discussing, and evaluating. Of course, it is everybody's new favorite Atlanta Hawks, just come in crawling out of the crevices of the floorboards. A lot of people were concerned we're stuck in that purgatory play-in range. Camera pans to the Bulls, but we won't talk about them. Now it is clear what the outline is for this team, and I am so excited. Let's double click on some of the key free agent activities and actions that they took, and then the main sort of focus area that I will be monitoring for them going forward, questions to define where and what I will be monitoring for. As always, thank you so much for watching. It really means the world. First, unsurprising is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Just makes you feel nice and fuzzy right there. Guy worked his absolute tail off, carving an incredible short career with the Minnesota Timberwolves, coming off of the bench and playing an integral part of their back-to-back conference finals run. He is finally getting paid, and he is going to be stepping into the very lightly worn shoes of Caris LeVert. Most appositely, I think that is going to be offensively, but of course he brings a significant upgrade on the defensive end, and I've always really believed in his offensive upside and his ability to really grow if he was allowed to be a little more empowered. And last year against the Oklahoma City Thunder, for example, when the Wolves were forced to play smaller, just cannot be a lumbering, slow, big, or anybody who's going to slow really your whole sort of flow down. He really shined, and a lot of those playmaking chops came to light, and I'm really excited to see what he is going to be allowed to kind of run with, paired alongside of our next key acquisition here in Luke Kennard. Another fantastic system player, has been in the league quite a bit longer, but the thing I want to point out here is he seems to be such a great system player, but he has only really been a part of top-heavy systems. Looking at the two-headed monster with the Clippers, then the big three over in Memphis. These are teams that don't allow quite a ton of oxygen, at least offensively, but the flashes are pretty undeniable. You also just hear them coming out of the cracks, somewhat similar to when Bane goes to Orlando and all of a sudden he's like a top 20 player in the NBA. Kennard's on-ball juice has been there. Again, I think it's mainly been a function of opportunity, but now he definitely will be empowered alongside of probably Jalen Johnson and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, pending the matchups, to drive the initial advantage creation and initiation, more so by committee, and I'll talk more about that later. Last but not least is Kristaps Porzingis. Seems like he managed to survive the 28 weeks later zombie virus, and I'm really happy for him. Somehow he's going right back over to Latvia to compete. And yeah, I guess it didn't end up mattering with Tatum tearing his Achilles, but oh my God, man, you really need to make sure that you last through one postseason, like just one. I feel for the guy though, and it's relevant for the Hawks because as everybody will talk about his career through the lens of health, when he is on the floor, he is pretty consistently great in driving two-way impact, and that comes with being 7'3", but also able to stretch the floor, leading to the second piece here, which is the spacing and what kind of a wrinkle that it can offer in sort of pick and roll situations with Trae Young. You think about the Haliburton Turner pick and pops. I think that is pretty evident, really challenging the opposing bigs to decide who they want to really target and stay in front of. If Trae is having success, sort of circumventing his primary defender, will you open up those threes? That would be helpful. If Porzingis is now 2 of 3 from that same sort of action, maybe the big is now going to hug him a little bit more, which just allows Trae even more room to attack, getting to his patented floater. And then as a defensive backstop, I mean, the guy is just great. There really isn't too much to really say about it, other than maybe some slight concern over that inevitable wear and tear on his body by really being a defensive anchor. It also unlocks more versatility lineup-wise, because now we can go double or even single big for the Hawks, looking at Okongwu, who they clearly showed they have a big vote of confidence in by sending out Clint Capella over to the Rockets, which is pretty cool if you're him, and his profile being a little bit undersized but extremely switchable on the defensive end. Porzingis coming in and providing help side value and role, his ability to space the floor really unlocks that potential look, pending what their opponents are doing with maybe going double big their own. You think about maybe Orlando with a Goga or a Mo Wagner, as well as Paolo, like things like that. And then last but not least is what I'm calling system faith, which means just coming from Boston, I really think matters, because I think Kristaps is going to exemplify buying into his role very, very well for a team that I do believe is going to see some material changes in how it's evolving, how it wants to attack offensively. And that's a great segue to the focus area I will be monitoring for the Hawks, and that is the offensive evolution from an isocentric or heliocentric model to a more egalitarian one. And I think that the best frame of reference, based on who they acquired and some of what was evidenced last year, is the Indiana Pacers. They have an elite creation engine in Trae Young, mirroring Tyrese Haliburton. When you step back and really survey the league, both of those guys have to be in the top 5 to 7 as far as just objective playmakers and being able to manipulate defenses to open up pockets of space to pass to, leading guys that way. Sure, you can point to some of the physical limitations from Trae. I would just say he's pretty close to maximized it, and even at that, he's still capable of 12 to 14 assists a night, and we saw it last season in how he had already started to shift how he was driving value for the team. They also now have more defensive guards, looking at Nembhard and Nesmith, now with Dyson Daniels and Alexander-Walker, possible of bringing a really long night if you are a team with only 1 or 2 heavy usage creators like the Knicks, for example. They can also coexist with each other quite well. And that's important because insulating Trae Young defensively is something that will matter come the postseason. And it's been a not unspoken, but pretty evident point of concern with Trae Young's viability for bringing and leading a team deep into the postseason is, yeah, he's going to get attacked. Well, how do you offset that? You flank him with really stellar defensive stalwarts that are also versatile, like a Dyson and Alexander-Walker. The small forward, especially, that would be, I'm assuming, where Alexander-Walker would probably slot in if they were playing the Cavs, for example, with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. But assuming they're not, Risache, I'll start with, this is probably the most willing to do the dirty work and most bought into team first success for a number one pick I've ever seen. That being said, he did go number one to a team that wasn't in the super dark depths of the Marianas Trench of tankathon teams. It was pretty miraculous that the Hawks even got him, but even still, his buy-in from the get-go to sprint the floor, to defend his absolute towel-off, to get on the floor for loose balls has not been short of impressive. And again, with that kind of stature as a number one pick is very, very important, underpinned by probably the perfect physical phenotype and build for the modern NBA when it comes to the small forward position. It's a hole for so many teams right now is that switchable 3-4 guy, like a Trey Murphy, that's why he is so valuable. Definitely not at the level of defender yet, given how young he really, really is. But for me, a huge indicator is simply attitude and effort. He's got both, and I really do believe in him continuing to grow offensively, even though he didn't come in like a gunslinger and really drop anybody's jaw out of the gate. I do want to flag Vit Krejci, though, because he deserves it. Thinking about the maybe unclear initiation piece for the secondary unit, Vit Krejci is really coming along as a facilitator, probably not as your true blue 6, 8, 7, whatever he actually is, point guard, but man, does he have some flashes of truly brilliant facilitating. He is not afraid to make some of these flashy things. But what I love about him even more is that when there is, let's say, a primary initiator like a Jalen or Trae or whatever, he is so quick to get off of the ball immediately and also works his towel off in a very similar sense to a Risa Shea. And those two guys with very similar builds, profiles, and again, the attitude and effort components, I really, really, really like. And for Vit, especially if he would be sort of coming in for Jalen or Risa Shea, some of the flashes we saw of an improved handle and confidence in his playmaking might end up being pretty significant in being an auxiliary piece to the Luke Kennard, Alexander-Walker, and Jalen Johnsons. I just wouldn't be surprised if he's actually a meaningful contributor to the Hawks in the postseason, coming off of the bench based on what we've seen so far. Jalen Johnson coming in as the clear X factor of the team. It is extremely on the table and possible that this guy has a breakout season this year. Given the overall infrastructure and talent on this roster, I would say it's the best the Hawks have offered him. Very willing passer at 6'9", showing a lot of prowess on the defensive end, especially in the versatility department, but is very, very skilled as well offensively. And given his size and skill, it's really not dependent on Trae or anybody else to really give it to him, and that is kind of a strong parallel to me of your Pascal Siakams, going back to the Pacers metaphor. I also think it's worth mentioning, because I did before, the possibility of double big lineups with Porzingis and Okongwu at the 5 and 4. I definitely do trust Jalen Johnson guarding threes. I don't think that would be that much of a concern. You think about the jumbo lineups like the Houstons and Dallases, like the Hawks can now get there with Johnson at 6'9" at the 3, Porzingis at 7'3" at the 4, and then Okongwu at 6'9", but he plays much bigger than that at the 5. And then Okongwu himself, extremely switchable defender. I'm not saying he's as good as Bam, but the build and the height and the size and his ability to play bigger than he is really draws some comparisons to me mentally. Some ability to space, I really wouldn't count on it, but what matters to me is I'm curious to see how much confidence he gets from this pretty clear vote of confidence that the Hawks front office is showing him in shipping out Clint Capella. Clearly, they have a lot of faith in his ability to hold up, not only throughout the regular season, but the postseason as well. So the changes, I'm making assumptions now for the Hawks in this kind of Indiana Pacers metamorphosis, if you will. It all starts with Trae Young evolving his game more into the Haliburton mold. It kind of reminds me a bit of Kyrie Irving 2 seasons ago in the Mavs postseason run, where he's able to really pick his spots and really dedicate and commit to the defensive end, and otherwise really be focusing on elevating and empowering, and most importantly, establishing his contemporaries in the defensive psyches so that when it really becomes nut crunch time, he is afforded slightly more space to attack and can trust those teammates when there are sort of bad situations, he gets caught, or they're actually open, because now they've been in rhythm throughout the actual game. And so that's what I mean about Haliburton, and where Trae needs to get to is empowering and unlocking more democratic attacks. That is a staple of the Pacers offense. Haliburton is probably the most unselfish superstar ever, honestly, where the dude can straight up and has finished a game with like 8 points but 14 assists, and that is great. One criticism I would have of Haliburton, kind of like Jamal Murray, is you'll often find when he does have dud games offensively and then the Pacers lose, a lot of times he shot like 7 times from the field. And I don't know if there's something in his contract where if his efficiency is too low, he just like shuts down. It's kind of like Jimmy Butler in a way. Like they just don't necessarily have that kind of ultra aggressive gene, or at least Jimmy not so much anymore. Trae Young is not like that, is where I'm trying to go. Is he's had maybe those numerical counting stat outcomes, but the percentages are definitely there. Like Trae did not have his best shooting season of his career last year, but I don't know if it was told to him or he reflected and landed here himself, but it seemed like he was really leaning into his facilitation prowess because, again, he is one of the most elite table-setting point guards in the NBA. But he would have like 4 for 15 nights where the field goal percentage is not there. Even if he's not hitting shots, I still find some degree of value in it because you are still establishing yourself in the defensive psyche, at least somewhat bending defenses to unlock your peers to attack. Definitely something that I wish that Haliburton, Jimmy Butler, whoever would still take to heart. There is still value there, even if the shot isn't a perfect one. Also, leveraging the pace that, of course, the Pacers all embody. Now Trae is flanked with even more athletic wings and guards that it would behoove Quinn Snyder and this team to really not lean into. Guys like Zachary Risachet, Dyson Daniels, even Jalen Johnson. These are super athletic guys that can really push the pace in the open floor. Those are just a lot of quick decision makers. And I put out a video on this before, but the real truth behind the whole Pacers pace thing, it's really not even that much about throwing the inbounds and like sprinting up the floor as fast as you possibly can. It's about the quickness of decision-making once you're there. It's all about just give the ball up, go. 1.2 seconds to decide, are you going to shoot, drive, or pass? And then you just do that. That takes a type of cerebral skill and awareness and IQ to do and really effectively unlock, which is one of the superpowers of the Pacers, is that all of those guys are extremely cerebral and connected and understand where guys are going to be and can map the floor. I do see that potential for the Hawks, especially looking at Alexander-Walker, Dyson, Jalen Johnson. You think about those guys, they're basically all guards to point guards, at least in a role sense. I mean, Jalen Johnson initiates offense. Trae is obviously a point guard. Dyson is like technically a 2-guard, but he can lead secondary units. Alexander-Walker literally led Minnesota's secondary units. So I really like that similarity. Next is the defensive potency and optionality, most importantly, without sacrificing offensive potency. So you have more versatility defensively, bringing in Alexander-Walker, bringing in Porzingis, assuming health, but you also get more optionality of how you want to integrate them into this lineup, given the length and athleticism that comes with them. The important thing, though, and similar to the Pacers, is they do not sacrifice things on offense. I really think of Obi Toppin first and foremost when I think of your Risa Shea and Vit Krejcis, and the unspoken benefit of an egalitarian approach to scoring is that everybody feels a little more empowered to find themselves in the flow of the game, and all of a sudden, Obi Toppin shot like 41% from three in the playoffs, which is absolutely insane considering, one, where he was from when he was drafted, but two, even how he shot in the regular season. It wasn't even there, and you don't get those kinds of leaps without feeling empowered by your best player and leader. I really, really believe that Obi Toppin is the poster child billboard example of what a guy like Haliburton can do to and for your auxiliary players. And I do see a ton of potential for Trae to do the same for guys like Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, even Zachary Risa-Shea. I'm really excited to see it. Lastly is the backup creation by committee without Karis LeVert, who, let's face it, isn't even necessarily the best sort of creator on the planet anyway. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Kennard, Jalen Johnson, and Vit Krejci. I can really see those guys kind of morphing into this amoeba of guard-like creation abilities and everybody getting off the ball really quickly and relocating everywhere and making a bunch of threes and shit. That's going to be a lot different because you're not just relying on a singular guy off the bench to really drive that secondary unit. It's going to be a lot more improvisational, which again is going to fall closer and closer to the Pacers model from last year. Again, it's worth reemphasizing Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard are not used to getting recruited by, let's just say, max paid players. I really fucking think that matters, and I think that's really, really awesome of Trae to do. And to feel empowered by who will be your best player is only going to make you want to buy in and help the team however you can even more. Jalen Johnson, coming off of that season-ending injury, I think is going to be very, very hungry. He's also just on the clock for a breakout. I get the sense that he himself is really focused on making a splash this year, obviously bringing in clear upgrades in the roster is a signal that now is going to be the time. And surveying what we know about all of these guys, I think he can also deduct that he is almost the ceiling determinant for this team. I mean, if he can be like a top 25 player in the league, like it's going to get really tough to beat this team for their Eastern Conference opponents. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Kristaps Porzingis, similar levels of hungriness, but for different reasons. Alexander-Walker just got paid. So now it's time to prove everybody, again, that you belong here, that you deserve this new contract. Porzingis, I mean, you won a championship, but you really didn't. And then now you're going off to Latvia, which, side note, kind of pisses me off, if I'm being honest. I know it's not like you can be like, you can't go, that's stupid. It's like Luka coming back from playing EuroLeague over the summer and is clearly out of shape and is actively a detriment to his team. And then fast forward to like whatever February and he's traded by Nico Harrison and everyone's like, what? No, that's crazy. Dude, that's so fucking annoying, and I kind of feel that. Last but not least, the defining questions that I will look to find answers to next year. Number one, can Trae Young hone or lean into his inner Haliburton? To what extent can he? This is about a democratic offense that needs to be empowered by its best player. We saw flashes last year of his willingness to do so. Now it is going to be his decision to ingrain that into the broader offensive identity of this Hawks team with more versatility, optionality in Porzingis and Nah, as well as this higher defensive floor that is sort of covering for him that now he gets to utilize and mold as a jumping off point to really drive winning. Next is, can the backup creation committee really coalesce? That is your Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Luke Kennard, Jalen Johnson. They do not have a traditional backup point guard. This is going to be a committee thing. So I definitely have faith, as I mentioned, in Alexander-Walker specifically. I think he's been shafted a little bit on his opportunity to really hone or even just showcase what he can do when given more responsibility. Kennard has always been underestimated for his on-ball juice. And then Jalen Johnson, as we mentioned, he's on the clock for a breakout, and his season-ending injury had to have been really frustrating. So I expect him to be extremely, extremely hungry and excited to make a splash in that way. Plugs into the last question, which underpins pretty much everything else. Can Jalen Johnson and Porzingis just stay healthy? Jalen, unfortunately, has a bit of a track record at this point. Porzingis, I'm not even kidding when I say I might rest him for half of the regular season, and if he doesn't make it through the playoffs, just cut him or buy him out. I think he only has 1 year anyway, so that's a really good call by the front office. But it is so time for that man to actually be there for his team for a postseason run. And he offers such a boost to the ceiling of every single team that he plays for, because when he's healthy, he is so consistently impactful on both ends of the floor. It is so cripplingly cursed to watch this man not be able to do it. And for this specific team at this specific time, he is definitely a key that could really galvanize where Trae Young can get to in the simple outside-in attack actions, what kind of defensive lineups and mix and matching they can get to with him as their backstop, because he is so prolific at it. And then Jalen as well, serving as that secondary tentpole for the initial advantage creation, the two-way versatility defensively, and really just bringing that exceptional talent that only really comes from within. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.